Condemnation from around the world, with the exception of Washington, London, and European capitals, as Israel bombs the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, killing some senior Iranian officials. Russia and China strongly condemn the Israeli strike, warning of its potential consequences for the region. The Russian embassy in Tehran said in a statement that it was deeply shocked and outraged by the attack and called it a flagrant violation of the foundations of international law, including the Vienna Convention, which guarantees the safety of diplomatic and consular places. China's foreign ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin issued a statement saying, quote, "The security of diplomatic institutions cannot be violated, and Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity should be respected," closed quote. Russia called for a UN Security Council emergency session, which was scheduled for 3 p.m. on Tuesday in New York. For more on that, we go to Tehran to speak with Dr. Mohammed Marandi. He's a political analyst and academic, and a professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. We spoke with him via Skype on Tuesday. Dr. Marandi, maybe you could lay out for us where you think we're at as this thing has developed.
Well, from the very beginning, there was a concern that the genocide will ultimately lead to an escalation where a greater regional conflict will emerge, and that could lead to a global catastrophe. It could lead to a global energy crisis, a crisis that we've really never seen before. But the Americans and the Europeans and the Canadians, the British and the Australians, they insisted on supporting the Israeli regime as it continued its genocide. And the regime, since it could act with impunity, it has no red lines. So it began to increasingly strike civilian targets in Lebanon. It began to increase its attacks on Syria. And ultimately, as we all know, they bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus. And the Europeans, they have not condemned it, neither have the Americans. And that just goes to show how far the Israeli regime can go in the eyes of the West. For them, this apartheid, racist, ethno-supremacist regime can carry out genocide. It can bomb country after country. It can kill civilians in the West Bank and Lebanon and Syria. It can bomb embassies. It can do whatever it wants. And that, I think, is what will ultimately lead to a further escalation, because the region recognizes that the West is not going to yank on the leash. And the only thing that can put Netanyahu and the Israeli regime in its place is a harsh response. So I think that it is inevitable now that the Iranians will strike back at Israel. Now, when will they strike? How will they strike? I don't know. But I think that there will be a significant strike on the regime.
You know, I'm looking at this war side by side with the war that's being fought in Ukraine between NATO and Russia. And it seems that someone somewhere is hell-bent on escalation. The things that are being done, for example, this strike on Iran, it's not even just a strike on Iran. It's a strike on the Vienna Convention of 1960. It's a strike on the entire diplomatic order, just like the genocide has been a strike on the entire, the whole purpose of the United Nations, the whole post-World War II order after the genocide that took place in Europe. what do you think? What's driving this? Who wants to go this crazy?
Well, I think obviously Netanyahu and his government, they have an interest in continuing the war. Netanyahu for his own personal reasons, his legal problems, and his government, of course, is the most right-wing government from a regime that is extremely fanatical anyway. There's no real left and right in Israel. They're all just fanatics. But these are the more fanatical than the others. So they have an interest. And I think that their allies in the United States will push the U.S. government to continue backing them down this road. It's obviously not in the interest of the United States. Morality aside, and the fact that the United States has destroyed its credibility across the world, and it's shown itself to have no moral compass. But the United States is sacrificing its future status in the international community because of this genocide. But the Israeli regime is pushing forward. They've been defeated on the battlefield in Gaza. They've killed tens of thousands of people, probably 50, 60,000 people in all, because many are still under the rubble and many have died of disease and hunger and malnutrition. But that's not victory. In fact, I would consider that to be the Israeli regime's biggest defeat, because the world has come to hate the regime, and it's lost its legitimacy in the eyes of most of those who thought it was legitimate in some way or form. But it's lost on the battlefield. It hasn't been able to take North Gaza. It hasn't been able to take central or southern Gaza. So when it can't defeat the resistance in such a small territory, that's after 6 months, that is a horrific defeat. And of course, in the north, they are being hammered. So the regime is looking for a path to victory, or at least a path to escape defeat. But this path that it is currently pursuing is a path to greater defeat.
It seems that Netanyahu's, I guess, necessity to pursue, a course of self-defense. But just to frame this for listeners that aren't aware of the fact, Netanyahu was under criminal prosecution when he became prime minister again, and during that time, any criminal proceedings are stayed. He has an immunity as prime minister. The moment he's not prime minister, those things will be accelerated, and he'll find himself in prison within a short period of time. Just about everyone familiar with the case acknowledges that. And so he has a vested interest in extending his stay in the office as long as possible, and politically, the only route to that really is to continue this war. As the war goes on, Israel, his very survival basically becomes more and more of a question. And it seems that this ultra-Zionist who came to be prime minister in the first place with a pursuit of ultra-Zionism, it has his personal fate tied to the destruction of Israel.
Yes, it is ironic. Netanyahu's regime has done more damage to the Israeli regime than any of the regime's enemies could ever hope to achieve. The Israelis have become known across the globe to be a genocidal regime. When I've been to China twice in the past 6 months, and the mood in China is very hostile towards Israel. That was not the case in the past. In the past, the Chinese really took no, clear position when it came to the issue of Palestine. But now the mood has changed drastically. I've been to Russia twice since October the 7th, and the mood there is extremely anti-Israeli, and even in India, where we saw a lot of support for the regime as the genocide continued, and children, we saw people saw more and more children being massacred. India shifted its position, and public opinion began to move away from that of supporting the Israeli regime. So Netanyahu has, through committing these crimes, he has destroyed Israel, and I don't think that Israel can survive in the long term. Of course, these are not Netanyahu's crimes. Public opinion in Israel supports the genocide. In fact, a significant segment of public opinion, if not the majority, supports intensifying the genocide. So this is not something that we can pin the blame for the genocide on a particular person or a particular party. However, because of his selfish interest, Netanyahu, he has done more to pursue his own personal interests than the interests of the regime than previous prime ministers.
Dr. Marandi, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.